Have you ever caught yourself talking out loud when no one else is around? Maybe you're working through a problem, narrating what you're doing in the kitchen, or quietly coaching yourself through a hard moment. And maybe, just maybe, someone walked in and gave you that look, that slightly raised eyebrow, that half smile that made you feel just a little bit embarrassed. If that's ever happened to you, I want you to hear this clearly. There is nothing wrong with you. In fact, there might be something remarkably right with you. Talking to yourself is one of the most misunderstood behaviors in psychology. For years, people treated it like a quirk, a bad habit, or worse, a sign that something was off. But science has quietly been telling a very different story. A story that says the people who talk to themselves aren't strange. They're often some of the most self-aware, emotionally intelligent, and mentally sharp people in the room. Today, we're going to explore 5 rare traits that people who talk to themselves tend to share. If this is something you do, stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're not going to feel embarrassed about it anymore. You're going to understand it. And understanding yourself is one of the most powerful things you can ever do. Let's start with trait number 1. You have an exceptionally active inner world. When most people think about talking to themselves, they imagine someone muttering under their breath about groceries or rehearsing a difficult conversation in the shower. And yes, that happens. But what's actually going on beneath the surface is something much more significant. Psychology shows that people who regularly talk to themselves tend to have a richer, more complex inner life than those who don't. Your mind is constantly generating thoughts, making connections, processing emotions, and building narratives. And sometimes that inner world becomes so full, so alive, that it naturally spills outward into spoken words. Think about it this way. When a thought stays locked inside your head, it can feel abstract, foggy, even overwhelming. But the moment you say it out loud, it becomes real. It takes shape. You can examine it, question it, respond to it. Talking to yourself is how your active mind externalizes its own complexity. Research in cognitive psychology refers to this as inner speech, and it's deeply connected to imagination, creativity, and advanced thinking. Writers do it, artists do it, scientists do it, not because they've lost touch with reality, but because their minds are working so hard that silence simply isn't enough to contain everything happening inside them. If you talk to yourself, it's likely because your mind never really switches off. And while that can sometimes feel exhausting, it is also the mark of someone who thinks deeply, feels deeply, and engages with the world on a level that many people never reach. Trait number 2. You are better at regulating your own emotions. This one surprises a lot of people, but the research here is genuinely fascinating. Studies in psychology have shown that people who talk to themselves, especially those who use their own name or refer to themselves in the third person, are significantly better at managing difficult emotions. Researchers call this distanced self-talk, and what it does is create a small but powerful psychological gap between you and the feeling you're experiencing. So instead of saying, "I'm so angry right now," you might say something like, "Okay, why is Sarah feeling this way? What does she actually need right now?" And that tiny shift from first person to third activates a different part of your thinking. It moves you from being inside the emotion to observing it. And when you can observe an emotion, you can work with it instead of being swallowed by it. Think about the last time you were overwhelmed. Maybe you stood in front of the mirror and quietly talked yourself through it. Maybe you walked around and narrated your feelings to yourself just to make sense of them. That wasn't weakness. That was emotional intelligence in real time. Psychology shows that people who use this kind of self-talk are less reactive, better at problem solving under stress, and more resilient after setbacks. They've essentially developed an internal therapist, a voice that can hold space for what they're feeling without drowning in it. If you've always been the kind of person who processes out loud, who narrates your way through hard days, who coaches yourself through things others might not even try to face alone, you are not fragile. You are someone who has learned, perhaps without even knowing it, one of the most valuable emotional skills there is. Trait number 3, you have a naturally high level of self-awareness. Self-awareness is one of those qualities that sounds simple, but is actually incredibly rare. Most people go through entire years of their lives without ever truly examining why they do what they do, what they actually believe, or what patterns keep showing up in their relationships and decisions. They're moving through life on autopilot. But people who talk to themselves are rarely on autopilot. When you talk to yourself, you are doing something profound. You are witnessing your own mind. You're stepping back from a thought and engaging with it instead of just having it pass through. That act alone, the act of externalizing your inner experience through words, is a form of metacognition, which is the psychological term for thinking about your own thinking. Research indicates that people who engage in regular self-talk show stronger metacognitive ability, which is closely linked to better decision-making, greater personal insight, and a deeper understanding of their own motivations. You might have noticed this in yourself. Maybe you're the person in your friend group who tends to understand your own reactions better than others understand theirs. Maybe you've caught yourself mid-thought and questioned it before acting on it. Maybe you've worked through a decision out loud and surprised yourself with the clarity that followed. That is self-awareness. Real, lived, practiced self-awareness. And it didn't happen by accident. It happened because you built a habit of checking in with yourself, of giving your inner experience a voice, of paying attention in a world that constantly tells us to look outward instead of in. Trait number 4, you have a strong, resilient mindset. There is a moment that most people who talk to themselves know very well. It's the moment when things are hard, when doubt creeps in, when the task feels bigger than your ability to handle it, and a quiet voice inside you says something like, "Come on, you can do this, just one step at a time." That voice is not accidental, and it is not small. Psychology shows that positive self-talk is one of the most reliable predictors of mental resilience. Athletes have known this for decades. Sports psychologists have long documented how the way elite performers talk to themselves before and during competition directly affects their performance, their focus, and their ability to recover from mistakes. But you don't have to be an athlete for this to apply to you. Every time you've quietly encouraged yourself through a hard situation, every time you've talked yourself down from panic, every time you've narrated a challenge as something you could handle rather than something that would break you, you are building resilience. You are training your mind in real time. Research indicates that people who engage in instructional self-talk, meaning talking themselves through tasks and challenges step by step, show reduced anxiety, better performance under pressure, and greater persistence when things get difficult. They are, in a very real sense, their own coach, their own anchor, their own calm in the storm. If you've been through difficult seasons and you came out the other side still standing, still functioning, still trying, I want you to consider how much of that had to do with the way you talk to yourself in those moments. Because resilience doesn't just come from circumstances. It comes from the story you tell yourself about those circumstances. And you, quietly and consistently, have been telling yourself a story strong enough to survive. Trait number 5, you are more creative and mentally flexible than most people realize. Here's something that might reframe the way you see this entirely. Some of the most creative minds in history were known for talking to themselves. Writers who read their work aloud, inventors who narrated their thought processes as they worked, philosophers who argued with themselves out loud to pressure test their own ideas. Einstein was famously known for his intense internal monologue that often spilled into muttered speech as he worked through complex problems. This isn't a coincidence. Psychology shows a strong connection between verbal self-talk and creative cognition. When you speak your thoughts out loud, you engage multiple cognitive systems at once. You're using language, memory, reasoning, and sensory processing all at the same time. This overlap creates a kind of mental richness that silent thinking alone doesn't always produce. Research also indicates that talking to yourself while searching for something, working through a problem, or learning a new skill actually improves performance on those tasks. Your words guide your attention. They keep you focused. They help your brain hold on to one thread while exploring another. There's also something important about mental flexibility here. People who talk to themselves are often comfortable inhabiting multiple perspectives. They'll argue both sides of a decision out loud. They'll play devil's advocate with their own ideas. They'll voice a worry and then answer it. This back and forth is not confusion. It's a sign of a mind that is genuinely curious, genuinely open, and genuinely willing to challenge itself in the pursuit of something clearer. If you are someone who talks to yourself, there is a very good chance that your mind operates in a way that is more expansive and more imaginative than the people around you might ever guess. That quiet running commentary in your head is not noise. It is your creativity, your curiosity, your intelligence making itself known. So let's bring this all together. If you talk to yourself, you probably have a rich and active inner world that most people never develop. You are likely more emotionally regulated than you give yourself credit for. You practice a level of self-awareness that takes most people decades to even begin to find. You have quietly built a resilient mindset, not through grand gestures, but through thousands of small moments of self-encouragement when no one was watching. And you have a creative, flexible mind that is constantly working to understand, to solve, and to grow. None of that is embarrassing. All of that is extraordinary. I want you to think about the last time you talked yourself through something hard. The last time your own voice was the one that steadied you. The last time you coached yourself through a fear, or narrated your way to clarity, or simply said out loud what needed to be said because something in you needed to hear it. You were not being strange in that moment. You were being deeply, genuinely human. You were doing what the most self-aware, most emotionally intelligent, most resilient among us have always done. You were taking care of yourself in the most honest way you knew how. Don't stop. If this video made you see yourself a little differently today, even just a little, then I'm glad you were here. These conversations matter. Understanding yourself matters, and you deserve to see yourself clearly, not through the lens of what others might judge, but through the lens of what the science actually shows, and what your own lived experience has already proven. If you want more insights like this, about the hidden meaning behind everyday behaviors, the psychology of personality, and the quiet strengths that often go unrecognized, make sure you subscribe. There are so many more pieces of yourself waiting to be understood, and I'll be here to help you find them.